This episode is made possible by our sponsor, Landmark College, the college for students who learn differently, offering comprehensive supports for students with ADHD and other learning differences, both on campus and online. Learn more at lcdistraction.org.
Welcome back to Distraction. I am your guest host, René Brooks. Today I am here with Shannon Russell, one of my favorite people on Twitter and probably one of your favorite people on TikTok. I wouldn't know because I don't go there unless somebody makes me. Shannon, welcome.
Hi. Thank you. I'm so honored to be here with you.
I'm glad that you're here.
This is the first time we've ever talked.
Yeah, no, we get a chance to be like, here, do you want to do this thing? Yes, I want to do this thing.
Well, man, I am so used to people being like, let's do a thing, and I'm like, yeah, and that's it, and that's the end of it. So, I adore you.
Likewise. So basically, long story short, before we tell the long story, we're gonna have a conversation about some of the things that are often talked about as far as creating change within the mental health community, and what we think will work and what we think won't work and why we think it'll work or not work. And the thing that you must remember, dear listener, is that Shannon and I are in the same boat that you're in. We are two people with opinions. Those opinions don't have to reflect your opinions, and you might completely disagree with them, and that's okay, because they're opinions.
That's right.
So some of these things are hotly debated topics within the community. Which one do you want to start with, Shan? Do you want to start with the DSM?
Yeah, let's hit the DSM.
Okay.
And all of its faults and flaws and all of the things that it's for, actually useful for.
So faults and flaws is that it can pathologize things a little further than they need to be, and there's racist backgrounds and eugenicist backgrounds to some of these diagnoses. Yeah. Some of them are incomplete, don't reflect the experiences of people who have the conditions, and it seems to be difficult to affect change in the areas where it needs to be changed. The DSM is the Diagnostic Statistic Manual that tells people what criteria you need to diagnose someone with a mental health condition. And by people, I mean the clinicians who are qualified to use it and make a diagnosis. Like, a clinician is the only person who can officially diagnose you with something. There's self-diagnosis too. We can talk about that and how it's valid. It is, and that's totally cool. I got no issue with that. As far as my opinion of self-diagnosis goes, I think self-diagnosis is an excellent starting point, and that's where most of us begin. I think in order for people to have the best access to treatment that they can have, they would want to seek an official diagnosis at their earliest convenience.
Right.
And
yeah, I don't know anyone who self-diagnoses who that's the last step.
I don't know anyone who does either.
I self-diagnosed and that's it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that there are some people who are headed in that direction now, but I think that's really the exception and not the rule.
Right.
Like, for certain things, they're like, there's no standardized treatment for it anyway, so I'm going to beat the bushes to find a clinician and pay, the sometimes exorbitant amount for an assessment and all of that to find out that I have something that there's not necessarily super effective treatment for. Why don't we just assume that I have it and go with that and see if it helps?
Right. Yeah. And that really can help.
Yeah.
Unless you're looking for medication or a therapy that your therapist wouldn't give you without a diagnosis, which, if you have a good therapist, I can't imagine that would even be an issue.
Exactly that.
And one of the other issues with DSM is that it's treated as a Bible. It's treated as the definitive source, and it's not supposed to be that. It's a work in progress.
Exactly. It's updated routinely.
Exactly.
Well, not routinely enough. It's updated, but not routinely enough.
Right. But yeah, the evolution of ADHD alone is a story of like how limited our understanding was in the 90s versus the 2000s versus now.
Correct.
And so it's, if you bear that in mind, that it's a flawed text that's the best text we have for doing this, that's okay. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just something to help clinicians know the guidelines, know the boundaries, know, how can we find you the answers that you're looking for? And that's all that really matters in my mind.
Exactly. Because, I see a little bit of sentiment out there, like, who cares about the DSM? I do. I
Right.
care about the DSM.
Right.
Like, I don't think we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We can critique it, and rightfully so, without feeling like we need to just... Like, I think therein lies the challenge for me so many times, where people look at these types of institutions and go, this is flawed, screw this, I'm going to go out and create my own. Maybe we don't need to go that far, because that's more trouble. Like, to me, and obviously, like, the whole Black Girl Lost Keys thing, I believe in creating things if you don't have exactly the resource that is going to suit your needs. Like, I think that's amazing. I just think, to a certain degree, when we branch so far out, we're almost like we're splintering off to the point where we're watering down our effectiveness as a community sometimes. And I think that for similar goals, we could stand to work together a little bit better. And it just, like, everything turns into such, like, a faction, like SelfDiagnosis or official diagnosis.
Yeah.
Meds or no meds. Gift or not gift.
Right.
And it's like, there's pros and cons to both. Like, by the way, I'm in the not so much a gift camp. Like, well, and that's the thing. It's like, it doesn't have to be a gift in order for it not to be this terrible thing that means your life is over. Like, ADHD is, like, to me, it's like kind of a neutral. Like, it just is. Like, I have ADHD. I'm Black. I'm a girl. Like, those mean whatever I decide that they mean.
Yeah.
Like,
and the ADHD, I mean, I see the ADHD not so much as neutral as a double-edged sword. Like, the executive dysfunctions, each executive dysfunction has a benefit and a drawback. And so, like, the people who are focused on the gift are only focused on the good things that come with spontaneity. Like, there's a lot of great things like imagination that come with spontaneity.
Yes.
There's a lot of shitty things too, like making terrible, terrible decisions.
Yes.
Which we are constantly doing. So I always live in the gray area. There is no black and white in my mind.
Very
Most
few
things
things
you have to kind of stand in the middle.
Like,
very few. Right.
You shouldn't kill people. We can be black and white about that.
That's great.
Listen,
that's great.
Look,
I've seen
Shannon, I'm trying here. Like, as soon as I said it, I was like, he's gonna get me. Like, but what about these people? And I'm like, it's too late. That's the metaphor you came up with. Just say it, Brooks. It's too late.
I know.
It's too late. You're done.
It's well, getting back to DSM, like, and clinicians, like, that's another thing that I was thinking of is, like, people act like clinicians are the bad guys, when in reality, it's like a few shitty clinicians who have no business treating or diagnosing ADHD that are making it seem like clinicians don't know what the hell they're doing, and people share their horrible experiences. I don't know.
And it's like, I feel like we're blaming the clinicians when really we should be blaming the lack of training that they're receiving.
Thank you.
That is not something that they have any control over per se. Like, they can know it and they can go seek that knowledge. And I certainly think if you're going to claim that you are able to treat something, that you owe it to yourself and your patients to go seek that knowledge. But it's almost like the intent that's projected on their lack of knowledge. Like you literally don't know what you don't know sometimes. Even we don't know what we don't know sometimes. Like that's why all of us are out here like, hey, I got this eye condition that I found out that was related to ADHD.
Yeah.
Hey, I got this thing that I found out that was ADHD related, and I never knew that this was a thing. Hey, did you know sleep apnea was a comorbid? Hey, did you know about this? Ehlers-Danlos, common comorbid with people with ADHD. Like there's so many different things that we're all learning, and some of us are teaching it to our clinicians. Every time I go to my doctors, I'm like, guess what?
Yes.
And fortunately, I have the kind of doctor who knows she is the doctor. But when it comes to ADHD, just ADHD, I probably know more about just ADHD than she does, which to me is no reflection on her as a clinician. She's a family doctor. She has to know everything. I only know this one thing. So I think that there has to be some middle ground with what we expect clinicians to do.
I think that's a bit like how people treat the DSM and clinicians,
Yes.
like that they are authority. And if you're an authority, there's no excuse for you to not know the latest thing that the people on ADHD Twitter or TikTok are talking about.
Yes.
And people on ADHD Twitter and TikTok, as much as there is amazing informational sharing and learning about the various aspects of ADHD, there's a lot of people who are full of shit and just making it up. And and because they have a big platform and they speak with such confidence and, like authority, people just buy it and they run with it. And they're like, okay, well now ADHD causes people to poop their pants. Like, no, that's not.
And it's just like, that's not a thing.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And then if you say it's not a thing, it's
we're having
like,
metaphor problems today.
No, we're fine. That was that was good. Like a symptom is a symptom. That's a symptom of something. Many things. There's a few things that's a symptom of. So, and it's just like, just because you say something very loudly and with a lot of people to listen to, it doesn't make it a fact. And that's okay. And that doesn't make you, it's like, sometimes if people feel really connected to a message and you have to be the person to come through and go, truly that's not the science behind that. That's not that's not how any of this works actually. And then people are like, it's like you're yucking their yum. You're crashing their party.
Yes.
And it's like, that's not my intention. My intention is for you to have information so that when you walk into your doctor's office, you're not telling them you have tic-tac-toe permanence when that's not what it's called. You can argue with me about what the name is called, but I didn't name it.
Right.
And I don't really particularly care what the name is as much as I care that you have the information so you can take it to your clinician or you can take it to Google or I want you to be able to access the information that you need in a way that is going to be most advantageous to you. And that is why I am constantly irritating the shit out of people by saying that we have to stop renaming things and stick to calling things what they are called. If we're going to change the name of something, we have to change it in a way that we're not cutting access off to people. And quite frankly, I used the example of ADD versus ADHD the other day. Did you see that? It was a mess.
You've talked about it before a bunch of times about your frustration with people wanting to change the name. And you actually responded to me about it once.
Yes, it really does drive me up the wall. And it's not because I'm not married to the name ADHD. I'm fully willing to acknowledge that perhaps it's not the best name. Here's how I also feel. They changed the name of ADHD in the late 80s. It is now 2021. Guess what's still floating around every single day? The term ADD.
They're coming around.
So now you want us to add this third as of yet. First of all, who picks what the name is going to be? Who makes that decision? Who renames it? You know what I'm saying? It's like, who renames it?
Yeah.
Who gets to put input into whether or not that's the appropriate name? How many people get pissed off and say, that's a stupid ass name. I'm not going to call it that. I'm going to call it this because I still like this name that I think someone should have listened to when I voted for it better. And so then we've got, like, you know, this whole explosive battle over what the name should be. So there's the battle for the name. Then there's the supposed adoption of the name. And everyone's like, well, if it's a good name, then people are going to use it. Renee, the name is bad. You need to get on board with this. And I'm like, who decides whether the name is good? Like,
yeah.
We can't decide collectively to call ADHD ADHD, and that is officially the name of it. If we can't, it's, you know what? It's like, if your kid asks you to buy something for them and it's expensive and you see they never use it and they come and ask you for something else that's related and equally expensive, are you going to buy it for them? No, because it's never going to get used. Don't make me turn this car around. We're not changing the name. That's final. Like,
we've seen this movie.
We're going to pause right here for a quick minute to tell you a little bit about some virtual open houses coming up at Landmark College. On December 15th and January 7th, you can get an idea of what it's like to be a student at Landmark College. They are having all sorts of events on those 2 days, a live chat session with admissions counselors, a student panel Q&A, a staff panel Q&A. They have a lot of good things going on. So if you've heard us talk about Landmark and you're curious to see what it's like for you or someone you love, check out their virtual open house. You can register and get more information by going to lcdistraction.org and click on open houses and visits on the left-hand column for more information.
Like, I get the mindset that, okay, ADHD doesn't, like, describe our condition. That's fine. I understand that. But a lot of people seem to think that a lot of the misunderstanding around ADHD of what it is and how it affects us, and kind of the minimizing of it especially, would somehow change if we change the name.
And do you know what's going to happen?
All you'd be doing is...
It used to be called ADD. It used to be called ADHD, and people are going to go, oh, is that all you have? Everybody has trouble remembering stuff sometimes. Why don't you just write something down and get a pocket watch? You'll be all right. That's not going away.
Just try harder.
That's not going away with a name change.
We have to end the stigma outside of the name. Like, if we can defeat the stigma of ADHD...
That's our battleground.
Right. Then, sure, after the stigma's gone, let's have a renaming party and, you know, call it something super happy. But whatever, it's it's a very magical thinking way of looking at it, that, you know, people would understand us if we just had a name that fit us. But I'm skeptical.
But you know what? Like, I can understand that comes from a place where people feel highly stigmatized, or like they can't see themselves in the definition. Like, a lot of people with inattentive ADHD really take umbrage to the word hyperactive being in there. And it's like, well, the reason why you take umbrage to the word hyperactive being in there is because of the stigma against being hyperactive.
Right.
So if we're talking about...
There's nothing inherently wrong with the word.
There's not. And you don't have it. But some people with hyperactive don't have a lot of inattentive symptoms. And I'll be honest with you, Shannon. Like, I think that more of us are combined type than anything else. Like, a lot of people really like go for the I'm inattentive. You ever see anybody running around yelling, I'm the hyperactive type. That's me. Maybe they're out like doing extreme sports or something and they don't have time to come back and tell us. I don't think I've ever seen someone claim exclusively the H, which, and no shade at all to the people who are exclusively inattentive. Certainly they know more about their own personal condition than I do. I think how we are trained to perceive what hyperactivity is, like, there are plenty of adults who have hyperactive ADHD and they're not jumping around like children. Like, that's the example that you have for hyperactivity is usually a child who can't sit still. But you really need to think about
a boy.
How does that, a little boy who doesn't sit still, and you don't think about how socialization and maturity can reshape the way that that's manifested in a person. There are a lot of us who are quite hyperactive who learned through maturing, like we found different ways to channel the energy, or we were so socially beat down by being hyperactive that maybe we're masking it really well, or maybe there's a million different ways that could have changed. But I think there are people who are super duper chatty, always full of ideas, composing, running from thing to thing. And they'll sit there and look at you straight in the face and seriously say to you, oh, I have inattentive. And you're like, oh, okay. And if it makes anybody who's listening to that feel any better, I said that to a clinician once, like, who was a specialist in ADHD. And I was like, oh, it was a marriage counselor, actually, like, but my ex-husband and I both have ADHD. And so I was saying, well, you know, he has more of the hyperactive and I'm pretty inattentive. And the man laughed at me right in my face. Like, he was cruel bastard. I was like, oh, he didn't have to do it like that, though. Like, he could have just told me. No, he actually laughed and was like, you're totally hyperactive. And there I was like, I'm not no kid. I don't jump around and stuff. I'm not like running around like this crazy guy is.
Climbing on the walls.
Yeah. But then, like, I had to, like, take it and go learn a little bit more about what hyperactivity means for a grown woman. And I was interested. So, like, I guess therein lies the problem for me with all of these debates. Like, healthy debate is cool, but I feel like people invest so much emotional energy into whether or not we're going to change the name, or whether or not it's a gift, or whether or not it's okay to take medicine, or whether or not it's a real disability. That is so much energy. And when I look at it, because I really, really love people with ADHD, and I think if you would pour this energy into helping especially adults with ADHD, because, like, let's be honest, someone is always going to come up with a resource for a child. I'm not saying that all the resources for children are perfect and helpful. All I'm saying is lots of them exist. There is still not enough assistance, guidance, support for adults with ADHD, and people don't care about you once you're an adult. Then you're just a slacker. Then you're just someone who refuses to do better. And there are a lot of adults out there struggling. So when I see these debates, I'm just like, I think I'm kind of like the get off my lawn person. Like, I got diagnosed with ADHD in 2009, man. I've been listening. Like, I think because there is such an influx of people who are newly diagnosed, there are more and more people who think that this is a new conversation. And they're like, you know, those of us who have been around the community for a long time, when people are like, here is my manifesto about this thing that we don't talk about. And we're like, oh, this bullshit's going around again. Here we go. Now we got to talk about it again. And like, even me, like, I have a thread that was wildly popular on Twitter about me not thinking that ADHD was a gift. But it was really about me popping off with my opinion. Like, it really wasn't like I really didn't want to have like a whole full-fledged discussion about it. One, because it's my opinion. My opinion isn't a fact, so you don't have to like rage against my opinion, because my opinion comes with very little power. Like, I could say, I think the name should be changed tomorrow.
Yeah.
Guess what? It's still going to be called ADHD in the morning. So it's like,
Well,
we rage against each other. We're really mean to each other when we don't agree.
We can be. We definitely can be. And that thread you talked about with the gift, that's the first one I remember seeing of yours. And I was like, holy crap, who is this person? I need to follow them. We had a discussion about it at the time, because I had, up to that point, thought of it as a gift, because I didn't. Well, you said you were just diagnosed in 2009. I was diagnosed in 1997.
Wow.
And went from there until 2018, basically with the Ned Hallowell perspective on ADHD, that it's a superpower, that I can do anything. And once I learned about executive dysfunction, that was just like 2 or 3 years ago. I was like, holy crap. These things that I thought were just personal failures.
It's revolutionary, isn't it?
It is. It's eye-opening. And I think a lot of the disagreements that we're talking about, why people get so heated and vested in it, is that it's about their identity.
Absolutely.
Am I a person who's inherently flawed?
Yes.
And so you're challenging like the very basis of how they perceive the world. Am I a winner or am I a loser? Am I going to succeed, or am I going to be, failing my whole life?
Yes.
And when somebody challenges them and says, no, this is not the way it really is, it really is a threatening situation to be in for them. And so they have to lash out. They have to defend their view.
Yes. And you know what? People with ADHD struggle with black and white thinking anyway. So we're taking this thing that people feel passionate about, and we're stripping away the black and white of it and saying, you don't have a gift. You also don't have a curse. It is what it is. And they don't want to sit in that area, because that area requires infinitely more effort than deciding on one or the other. Because living in the gray is not, it's not simple. There's a lot of roads, and there's a lot of things that drift around, and that can feel very uncertain, and I don't blame them, and no judgment here. And I'm not even saying I'm right. Maybe it is a gift or a curse. Who knows? It's just my opinion.
Right. The most hostility I've seen are from people who get really mad about when people talk about the downsides of it, the things that really negatively affect you. There are people who just get really hostile to that, as if people acknowledging, poor working memory is a negative thing are somehow going to affect their destiny and affect their ability to succeed.
Yes.
And it's not. It's an acknowledgement. It's an acknowledgement of, these are things that I struggle with. These are my limitations. And not everybody is even aware of their limitations, especially people with a lot of privilege. Privilege can kind of camouflage or hide or remove a lot of the obstacles that make ADHD difficult. And it seems like almost overwhelmingly the people who are out there saying ADHD is a gift, it's your mindset, you just have to change your mind. No, you need to change your bank account. Okay. That's what you need to do.
You need some money.
And that's, yeah.
And just like everything else, it's a spectrum. And I'm glad that everyone doesn't have to duke it out for years with their ADHD to get it to a place where they find it to be manageable. But for those who don't, for those people who found something early and it works for them and it's always worked for them and they're good, they can be very unsympathetic to those of us who have struggled our way through. It's just oh, everybody has that, whatever. They almost turn in, we almost hear the same ableist kind of things from them that we would expect to hear. That's why all of this neurotypical hatred, I'm have you met somebody whose ADHD is well managed? Have you met them? Have you talked to them about the problems you're having with your ADHD? That they're that's not ADHD. That's just your lack of motivation, because I have ADHD and I don't have that problem, and yak.
Right.
Everyone who is oppressing you is not a neurotypical person. They don't all have ADHD either, but oh my gosh, it's like, leave the neurotypicals alone. God, let them live. They're off making it to their appointments on time and remembering their kids' birthdays. God.
Yeah, I mean, and there doesn't need to be neurotypical hatred. There just needs to be
That's
ableism
all.
hatred. Like, we need to attack the problem, not the people who have that problem. Because that's
unless they're being oppressive, in which case we can kind of like kick them. Like, sometimes you got to put people back in their place. So Shannon especially is not telling you to sit passively by. Shannon's not a pacifist.
No, God no. And that's the whole thing with justice sensitivity. Holy shit! When I learned about that,
very much that's a thing. Isn't it great?
It is, and it can be affected by so many different things. Not just like ADHD people tend to have some forms of justice sensitivity, victim sensitivity especially. But that justice sensitivity can then be impacted by what kind of systemic oppression you're experiencing outside of your ADHD. So if you're a woman, if you're a gender minority, if you're a person of color, your ADHD and your justice sensitivity are gonna be experiencing things that make you way more reactive to seeing injustice than most people are. So it's just so complicated and fascinating, and there's a lot of nuance, and we gotta be comfortable with nuance. We really do.
And it's difficult for us because we do all have, like, symptomatically, we have some challenges with black and white thinking, and acknowledging that and being aware of that when you're entering these conversations.
Yeah. Like, the black and white thinking is real comfortable for us because everything else in our lives is so ambiguous and surprising, and we're constantly being caught off guard by stuff we're remembering that we forgot to remember. And so black and white thinking is a way for us to have solid, like, we know this is true, and I don't have to worry about, whether or not my opinion is faulty or not. I just know it. And I think that's a comfortable position to be in when everything else in your life is so chaotic.
Exactly.
You want certainty. You want a solid ground to stand on, and black and white thinking does that.
It gives you safety, and when someone comes for that, it makes you feel like they're yanking away your safety, and that's where some of the contention and the rage comes from. So I hope that was an interesting conversation for everybody. I thought it was great. Shannon, fantastic having you on the show. We'll have to drag you back in again. It'll be lots of fun.
It was so fun to be here.
I knew it was going to be a blast. I'm so glad you were able to make it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
For those of you who are looking to find Shannon, you will find him on your favorite social media, being his fantastic self. And I will be there to continue to poke at debates that I should leave alone. And that's that. Thank you so much for listening to Distraction. We'll catch you next time. Please reach out to us and let us know what you think. Record a voice memo or write an email and send it to connect@distractionpodcast.com. Distraction is created by Sounds Great Media. Our producer is Sarah Gurton. I'm René Brooks. You can find me at blackgirllostkeys.com and on Twitter at BLKGirlLostKeys.
The episode you just heard was made possible by our sponsor, Landmark College, the college for students who learn differently, offering comprehensive supports for students with ADHD and other learning differences, both on campus and online. Learn more at lcdistraction.org.